Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Anti-Money Laundering AML webinar. This is the second AML webinar in this series. In the first webinar, we provided an in-depth discussion of the different regulations and also discussed the current risks to the property sector. The objective of today's webinar is to explain how you can comply with money laundering regulations in respect of customer due diligence and how electronic identification services can assist with this. AML is quite a content-heavy topic, therefore a copy of the slides are available for you to download from the handout section of GoToWebinar. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat box and we will answer them during the Q&A section at the end of this presentation. Firstly, introductions. My name is Kelly Cronogue and I am a Finance Profession Assurance Technical Specialist here at RICS. I've been at RICS for 6.5 years now and always worked in this team. My background is in lettings and compliance, and at RICS I specialise in the client money and designated professional body schemes. So I'm going to introduce our other presenters. Glenys, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
So my name is Glenys Debelius. I've worked at the RICS since 2018. My background is in property management, both commercial and residential. I have worked for big corporations and also small local companies dealing in client money. So my specialism is client money, but also our designated professional body scheme.
Okay, and next, Ollie.
Hello, everybody. I'm the co-founder and MD of Thirdfort. Thirdfort helps law firms and estate agents with AML. We've got a single platform that you can use for all your AML. Yeah, I'm delighted to be talking a bit more around some of the challenges that estate agents have dealing with AML in this day and age, and how increasing regulation and fraud risk is making everyone's lives a bit more challenging, and yeah, how technology out there can help, and how specifically us as an example can help out as well.
Thank you, Ollie. And last but not least, Anna.
Good morning, everyone. Anna Sawbridge. I'm a senior policy specialist. Been at RICS for nearly 4 years, and for the bulk of that time I was head of registration and CPD, but moved over to the professional policy team in June of this year.
Okay, thank you. We're all going to go off camera now and we'll come back on later for the Q&A. So we're going to start the main presentation now. Okay. Here is an overview of the topics we are going to discuss today. This webinar will last for approximately 1 hour and 30 minutes in total, and there is some time included in this for us to answer your questions at the end. First, I'm going to provide you with an introduction to money laundering. So what is money laundering and who needs to register for supervision? Money laundering is the process of concealing the source of proceeds of criminal activity to disguise their illegal origin. You may have heard this referred to before as cleaning or laundering money. Money laundering could take place through hiding, transferring, and/or recycling illicit money through one or more transactions, or converting property into seemingly legitimate property. For RICS firms, HMRC is the supervisory body for money laundering, and firms who are required by law to register include estate agents, letting agents where the rent received exceeds €10,000 per month, and high-value dealers who deal in transactions of at least €10,000 in either one transaction or a series of linked transactions. The relevant regulations for money laundering are the Money Laundering, Terrorist Financing and Transfer of Funds Information of Payer Regulations 2017. Below are the relevant sections from the regulations that we're going to cover in today's presentation. Firstly, Regulation 18, firms must identify and assess the risk of money laundering and terrorist financing in its business. Regulation 19, firms must establish policies, controls and procedures to mitigate the risks of money laundering, which have been identified in the Regulation 18 risk assessment. And Regulation 27, customer due diligence must be undertaken to establish and verify the identity of customers and the nature of the transaction. We're going to discuss each of these in more detail later on. In addition to the money laundering regulations, the RICS also has a professional statement on countering bribery and corruption, money laundering and terrorist financing. The professional statement became effective from the 1st of September 2019, and it provides both mandatory requirements and best practice in relation to anti-bribery and corruption and anti-money laundering and terrorist financing. The professional statement applies to all RICS members and regulated firms involved in work where there is a potential for bribery, corruption, money laundering and/or terrorist financing. As you can see, this professional statement is not limited to those firms required to register with HMRC, and all RICS regulated firms are under an obligation to not facilitate or be complicit in money laundering. I'm now going to hand you over to Glenys, who is going to discuss the money laundering regulations in more detail and how firms can comply with each regulation.
Thank you, Kelly. So let's talk about some practical steps on how to comply with the regulations. Regulation 18, Firms Risk Assessments. What should you consider when putting together your risk assessment? Consider who your clients are. Do you have corporate clients or consumer clients? Do they come into your office and you meet them, or do you only deal with them remotely? How many clients do you have? These factors will have an impact on the level of risk to your business. Do you do business locally, regionally, nationally, or internationally, or a mix of all of those? Consider how these locations will have an impact on risk. Also, how do you risk rate your products and services that you offer? Are your transactions high or low value? And do you deal with cash transactions on a regular basis? Are your services or products delivered in person or remotely? This could also have an impact on risk. You may also need to consider whether there is a conflict of interest risk where your money laundering reporting officer or compliance officer are also fee earners. Next slide, please. Regulation 19, Policies, Controls and Procedures. The first thing to consider is that your policies, controls and procedures must be in writing. You must have a process by which they are reviewed and updated regularly, and a process by which you communicate the policies, controls and procedures to relevant staff, and how and when you will update the policies, controls and procedures. They must also be proportionate to the size and nature of your business. So large firms with lots of customers and high value transactions will be expected to go into a lot more detail than a smaller firm. Evidence must be kept on file that these policies, controls and procedures have been approved by senior management, and an audit trail must be kept of any changes made along with the evidence of that subsequent approval. Factors that must be included when writing your policies, controls and procedures. Risk management practices. These should include, for example, a statement of what is money laundering and the geographical scope of your work, global, national, local, for instance. Internal controls. This should include who your money laundering reporting officer is, what they are responsible for, and why they are suitable for the role, how and when staff are trained, and how this is recorded, and if you have an independent audit function to monitor your money laundering reporting officer. Customer due diligence. This should include the how, why, and when CDD is undertaken, how you risk rate your customers, when to use simplified, standard, or enhanced CDD when verification documents are acceptable, and how to identify sources of wealth. Reliance and record keeping. This should include when you rely on work completed by third parties and what to do if that work is not sufficient, how records will be kept and stored, and for how long, and how to deal with GDPR conflicts. Monitoring and management of compliance with the communications of such policies, controls and procedures. This should include how compliance with the legislation is monitored, how policies, controls and procedures should be updated and by whom, and how and when changes should be communicated. Next slide, please. Regulation 27, customer due diligence. You must undertake CDD, customer due diligence, on all clients where you have a business relationship. You must also undertake CDD if you suspect money laundering or have doubts regarding the identification documents provided. Customers that have an occasional transaction of €10,000 or more must have CDD undertaken. This can be one transaction or a series of linked transactions. There are 3 types of due diligence: simplified, standard, and enhanced. We'll go into these in a bit more detail shortly. You need to keep records on each customer of the risk undertaken and how the risk was determined and which type of due diligence was used. If you have an existing customer, you should consider if the customer's identity has changed or if the transaction is consistent with previous transactions, as this may impact on your assessment of the risks. You should use your firm's risk assessment to determine which levels of due diligence is suitable to the customer transaction. If you use standard and you feel that more information is required, you can upgrade this to enhanced due diligence if necessary. Next slide, please. Simplified due diligence. There are 3 types: simplified, standard, and enhanced. So let's look at simplified first of all. Your business may apply a simplified form of customer due diligence in some cases. Simplified due diligence is where the business relationship or transaction is considered low risk in terms of money laundering or terrorist financing. It can apply to any person you assess as low risk, with some exceptions. The types of customers that may indicate lower risk include a public authority or publicly owned body in the UK, a financial institution that is itself subject to anti-money laundering supervision in the UK or equivalent regulation in another country, a company whose securities are listed on a regulated market, a European community institution, a pension scheme that does not allow assignment of interests. You will have to risk assess the customer to establish that they are low risk. That is, you will have to detail why they are low risk and document that assessment. This does not mean that you do not have to do customer due diligence. You are still required to identify and verify customers' identity and identify and take reasonable steps to verify beneficial owner's identity. To apply simplified due diligence, you need to make sure that it is supported by your customer risk assessment. You monitor the business relationship or services provided to make sure that there is nothing unusual or suspicious from the outset. It is not prevented by information on risk provided by HMRC or any other authority in periodically published risk assessments. The customer is not from a high-risk third country. The customer is not a politically exposed person or a family member or known close associate of one. The customer is seen face-to-face, as is any co-owner. The source of funds or wealth from the sale from the transaction are transparent and understood by your business. The customer is not resident outside the UK. The property is not buy-to-let. And if the customer is not an individual, that the legal entity is not registered or administered outside the UK. You must not automatically assume that a party to the transaction is low risk to avoid doing an appropriate level of customer due diligence. Persons or businesses well established in the community or persons of professional standing or who you have known for some time may merit being categorised as low risk, but you still must have evidence to base this decision on. You must not continue with simplified due diligence if you doubt whether the person is the one demonstrated by the documentation. You suspect that the documents obtained for identification may be lost, stolen, or otherwise fraudulently acquired. Your circumstances change and your risk assessment no longer considers the customer, the transaction, or location as low risk. Next slide, please. Standard due diligence. This is the one that would be used for most of your customers and is most appropriate for individuals, companies, and trusts. This is used to identify the owner and beneficial owner, verify the identity of the customer, the nature and purpose of the transaction, and checks and establishes source of funds. Standard customer due diligence must be undertaken on intermediaries. Standard due diligence could include document check-in such as driving licence and passport, land registry checks, source of funds checks, checking companies' house records. Next slide, please. Enhanced due diligence. This applies in situations that are high risk. It involves taking additional measures to identify and verify the customer's identity and doing additional ongoing monitoring. In the case of politically exposed persons, this will include source of funds. Some examples when you must do enhanced due diligence are: you have identified in your risk assessment that there is a high risk of money laundering or terrorist financing. HMRC or other supervisory or law enforcement authorities provide information that a particular situation is high risk. The customer is from a high-risk third country. A customer is a politically exposed person, an immediate family member or close associate of a politically exposed person. The transaction is complex, such as in the case of legal entities, has more than 2 levels of ownership. The transaction is unusually large for your type of business, location, or for the individual. You must consider a number of factors in your risk assessment when deciding if enhanced due diligence needs to apply. The following are some examples of things to take into account. An unusual aspect of the business relationship. A person is resident in a high-risk area or country. Use of a legal person or arrangement to hold personal assets. A company with nominee shareholders or shares in bearer form. A person or business that has an abundance of cash or funds with no apparent source. An unusual or complex company structure given the nature of the type of business. Searches on a person or associate show, for example, adverse media attention, disqualification as a director, or convictions for fraud, money laundering, or bribery or corruption. If enhanced due diligence is appropriate, then you must do more to verify identity and scrutinise the background and nature of the transactions than for standard customer due diligence. How this goes beyond standard due diligence must be made clear in your risk assessment and policies, controls and procedures. For example, obtaining additional information on evidence to establish the identity from independent sources, such as more documentation on identity or address, or electronic verification alongside manual checks. Taking additional measures to verify the documents supplied, such as by checking them against additional independent sources, or requiring that copies of customers' documentation are certified. If receiving payment, ensuring it is made through a bank account in the name of the person you are dealing with. In the case of politically exposed persons, establish the source of wealth and the source of funds. Carrying out more scrutiny on business relationships and satisfying yourself that this is consistent, and more regular and stringent ongoing checks. Thank you. I will now hand back to Kelly.
Sorry everyone, took me a few minutes to get unmuted there. Thank you, Glenys. As Glenys has just mentioned, enhanced customer due diligence must be undertaken on politically exposed persons, commonly referred to as PEPs. A PEP is defined as a person who is entrusted with prominent public functions. An immediate family member of a PEP would include a spouse, civil partner, child, or parent. A close associate would include persons who have a joint legal ownership, legal arrangement, or close business relationship with the PEP. In the UK, public servants below permanent or deputy permanent secretary will not normally be treated as having a prominent public function. As already mentioned, enhanced due diligence must be undertaken if the customer is a PEP or a family member or close associate of a PEP, in line with both the definitions I've just mentioned and the firm's own risk assessment. Some examples of PEPs would include heads of government, members of Supreme Courts, and ambassadors and high-ranking officers in the armed forces. We've also included on this slide some examples to differentiate between lower risk and higher risk PEPs. Lower risk PEPs could include those from countries where there are lower levels of corruption and an independent judiciary free from political interference. A higher risk PEP could be from a country with weak anti-money laundering measures and political instability. At all times, firms must be following their own risk assessment under Regulation 18 and use this to support and determine what checks need to be undertaken on politically exposed persons, whilst also having regard for the regulations. We've discussed the relevant legislation and regulations in relation to money laundering, but smaller firms or SMEs may be wondering if and how these apply to them and how they can comply. The regulations, legislation, and the professional statement that we have already discussed apply equally to small firms as they do to larger firms. Smaller practices can sometimes be targeted by money launderers due to the perceived lack of policies, controls, and procedures. Under Regulation 18, an SME must undertake a risk assessment to mitigate identified money laundering risks to their business. Under Regulation 19, an SME must have written policies in place, which will include customer due diligence measures. A written policy will be unique to each firm, therefore a generic template possibly obtained from a larger firm will rarely suffice. And finally, under Regulation 27, customer due diligence must be undertaken on all customers in line with the firm's risk assessment. There is no exemption to the regulations for having a personal relationship with the client or customer. The COVID-19 pandemic has affected how businesses are able to operate, which may have also impacted their money laundering procedures. I'm now going to discuss some of these risks and how they can be mitigated. In relation to customer due diligence, the social distancing rules have meant that face-to-face meetings to verify original identity documents has become more difficult. Firms must ensure that all necessary steps are still being taken to establish and verify a customer's identity, and they can utilise technology capabilities if this is appropriate. Firms should review their risk assessments, policies, procedures, and controls, and update them to reflect any changes in how they are now operating. For example, if the way the customer identity documents are checked has changed. For the final part of my presentation, I'm going to briefly introduce electronic identification services and what firms need to be aware of before I hand you over to Ollie, who's going to discuss and present his product. The use of third-party electronic identity services is becoming more widespread. These companies can assist firms with establishing the identity of customers, whether a person is a PEP, and also beneficial ownership of companies. Whilst firms are permitted to use these services, the onus is always on the firm to ensure that the customer due diligence is being undertaken correctly. Some factors to consider when deciding whether to use electronic verification services include ensuring that the firm has a sufficient understanding of how to upload information, what data is used to verify identities, and how this information is stored, as well as ensuring that records are still available for the required period of time and that the firm can access these records if the provider ceases trading. I'm now going to hand you over to Ollie Thornton-Berry, who is the MD and co-founder of a company called Thirdfort, who are also an RICS tech partner. So just bear with us a moment while we just switch screens.
Thank you, Kelly. Hopefully that has worked and everyone can see my screen now.
Yep, can see you.
Great. Okay, so just make this big. So yeah, just touching on why anti-money laundering is getting harder, and there is some technology out there, but it still has lots of improvements that I think can be made. So why is AML, and we heard there the source of funds, why is it so complicated? Some observations from us, and we have around 600 businesses now use our technology since we launched 2 years ago, and that's made up of around 500 law firms, which is very much where we started. But then we expanded into the estate agency space about 3 or 4 months ago, because we had lots of estate agents started to tell us that AML and source of funds was such a nightmare for them. So we expanded the technology and now find lots of estate agents now use us. So got close to 100 estate agent businesses now use us. But some of the points that, why is it so complicated? So we hear this again and again, clients not understanding what's now required. So people buying and selling properties, we hear this so much, is I didn't have to do this when I sold my property 3 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever it is. So-and-so estate agent down the road didn't make me do this. Why do I need to come in with identity documents, bank statements, etc., proof of address? I didn't have to do this before. The second point is just with rising regulations. I mean, we've just heard lots about it there, and HMRC slapping more and more fines. It's actually becoming harder just to do AML, and then in a digital more regulated, but also more remote way of doing business. Technology still has not caught up. The regulations, we've seen AML regulations just rise in how onerous they are in the last kind of 2 or 3 years, and so quickly. I think there's an element of technology, which helps with compliance and risk mitigation across many sectors. But we see it as a real specific use case in property. We just don't think technology is quite caught up. So, and even today, the best technologies out there still requires some manual work, especially for some of the enhanced AML that we just heard about there. And we see lots of misleading claims where you see people some suppliers talking about, this is one platform that will do everything that you need, and it will take all your problems away. The issue with that is you often will still need to get certified documents, you'll still need to get bank statements, you'll still need to do source of funds checks, you'll still need to get proof of address uploaded. So we just think there's some things that are said which are not quite as accurate as they could be. What we think is a dream solution, and we don't, we're an example of obviously a supplier in a space that's focusing specifically on AML for property and lawyers. And we think the technology should do the heavy lifting. We think there should be a platform where you get a single pass-fail consider for all of your clients, and that's based on source of funds, enhanced AML, digital ID, proof of address, everything in there is verified with a single platform. So that's where we think you've got a nice green tick, and you can go into it and click down and see, around the source of funds, you can see financial information, source of funds, that's just pass, failed, considered, and the reasons why are included in the platform. And also something that we realize takes a lot of time is the back and forth that you have with clients, especially in source of funds, source of wealth, where you're actually getting the information, you're getting bank statements, you're getting them to tell you where they accrued their money. And then your client, the buyer and seller of that property, they shouldn't have to repeat this all again from scratch with their lawyer. And now if somebody buys a house in this country, they have to do KYC and AML 4 times often. So it's absolutely crazy that they have to do that so many times. We think they should only do it once. I'm using a secure application, and they can choose to share different aspects of their AML and KYC with different professionals. So it's one platform that does the end-to-end KYC and AML. It's not just individuals that are getting checked, but actually you can put businesses through them, especially on the letting side of it. There's lots of businesses that now own properties that are let out. Source of funds, that's becoming increasingly burdensome under AML, but again, that's where new technology, open banking, I'll touch on in just a moment to show how that works. PEP sanctions, fine, being able to monitor them, really, really important. We just heard that from Kelly. And also in the same platform, we don't see this yet, but title checks. So you can actually see who's listed on the title and then automatically run them through a AML source of funds checks as well. And it's saving you have to log into many different platforms. We know logging into HMLR's platform is pretty cumbersome at best. It's like logging into Lloyd's banking in the 1990s. So it's super clunky and time consuming for everyone. So we think there's an easier and simpler way to do that within one single platform. And yeah, I've touched on people not repeating it over and over again. So in terms of what's available today, yes, you can do like simple digital ID verification, know your business, PEPs checks, all of that's there. Enhanced AML, this is new. This is where we get into a newer aspect of it. And we see open banking, the ability for someone to one-click securely share bank statements digitally. You can get all the information that you need to do your source of funds, source of wealth checks. And especially if you've got that with a digital source of funds questionnaire. Just in one application. So it's that one-stop report that comes back. And I'll show you exactly what I mean by that in just a moment. Yeah, I think this is just a general point. I think tech suppliers, if they sell to retail, recruitment, accountants, they should be clear that that's a platform that's applied to many different regulated industries. Whereas we think, especially with, I keep banging the drum on this, property and legal, it's very specific. And it's very deep, some of the AML that you need to do, especially around source of funds. So we think tech suppliers should be crystal clear on this. And we've heard a lot of what the guidelines say and when you should. I'm not going to kind of labor this point. Everyone knows this is kind of, Kelly touched on it as well. Making sure that the DD on all customers and beneficial owners. This is such a, I think, new phenomenon to have to do this level of AML and enhance the DD on pretty much every single client, which maybe 4 or 5 years ago people didn't have to do. In terms of, here's some partners that we work with. We'll dwell too long on there. And I just want to give you a very quick overview of the platform that we've built and how that works. Just an example of one of the technology providers out there for those of you that might be considering different solutions. So yeah, you've got kind of, here's our website. It's super simple to log in and get going. You just sign in the top right. This can be integrated with Repit and the various other systems that people use. But if you use it out the box, it's a simple clicking that nice button in the top right. You can choose whether you've got a buyer or a seller, or if someone's gifting money, they also need to go through AML and UHMR regulations. But you then click on the purchaser or seller, you put in some information about that individual, the type of check you want. We actually now have an identity check that meets the Land Registry's digital ID standard. You can monitor them securely through the platform. That's key for agents. You can ask them to upload proofs of address through a mobile application. You can then, for the source of funds, source of wealth, you can get them to share bank statements digitally and complete a source of funds questionnaire. You can also, through the platform, if they don't, this is very much using a mobile phone app for the client, which I'll take you through a quick example of what that looks like in just a moment. But if that client doesn't want to use an app to go through the ID verification or source of funds, enhanced AML, you can just do a light identity check. So you can do a simple first name, last name, date of birth, PEPs and sanctions monitoring, or if there's a company that's buying or selling a property, you can also stick them into the platform there. And I think I've got an example which I can show you in just a moment, where you put in the name of the company and you can see who the ultimate beneficial owners are, and then you can quickly put them through Thirdfort. And we're very close to launching a Land Registry title integration that's coming in the early part of next year, which again is very in line with this one-stop shop to do all the checks in your clients. But going back to this part and the identity bit, which is going to save, if you see the 600 businesses that have started using us since we launched 2 years ago, you'll see what we hear again and again. It's not just a risk that's being reduced for this one platform, but it's a massive time savings for you and your clients. And they can use an application that is super simple for them. It's the equivalent of using like a Revolut app or a Monzo or Starling that they use for life's everyday transactions. So the first thing they do when they get sent a link to the Thirdfort application is they enter some basic info about themselves. They then go into the Thirdfort app, which looks like this. They've got the ID verification. They've got the bank statements for source of funds. They've got the purchase funds, the source of funds questionnaire. They can upload the proof of address. If they have any problems whatsoever, they can chat to our support team directly through this application. So it's not taking you out of your busy days where you should be focused on, you and your team, your colleagues should be focused on selling the property. So you can see here that's entering some basic information for their address. You can see in the second bit, once they've done the address, we want them to obviously upload the ID document, whether it's a passport or driver's license. You're probably thinking, I work with lots of international people, so how does it work for those international people? This technology works with over 190 countries, so it is international. We've got lots of businesses that verify IDs for Middle Eastern, for US, for Chinese, for South American clients, so it covers globally. They're asked to take a photo of the front and back of the driver's license or passport, and if they're using the land registry standard that we've launched, it's actually only a passport. They read the chip in the passport, so they hold their phone up to the passport document. But then we also need them to record a short video of themselves with their phone, so it proves that they are who they say they are, and they're not holding up someone else's photo and using someone else's document. So we use something called liveness technology, which is AI powered, to make sure that person matches the image in the passport or driver's license. So they're asked to look over their shoulder. So that's all kind of super simple for the ID part of the application. But we then also need, as was touched on by Kelly, we also need to do source of funds, source of wealth checks on lots of buyers now, which we didn't have to do a couple of years ago. So if I just show you in this part of the application what that looks like. So here they can go in, and this is using very new technology. So they can go in here and they can click their banking application. We have an FCA authorization to do this, but they can go in here and they can click on their current account, savings account, and then they can get flipped straight back to the Thirdfort application. And from that, we've then got 12 months of bank statements. It really is as simple as that. Again, this is another example of going through to NatWest and just within there, just saying, okay, which accounts do I want to share with Thirdfort? Thirdfort's going to run some analysis on that information and produce a nice, simple report for you, so you can quickly see who your client is and where their money comes from. So it's saving you so much time because the technology is actually doing the heavy lifting for you. And then just in this final bit of the application, this is where we've built a nice, simple digital questionnaire in here that asks some questions around who is the client, where is that client's money coming from, that they're using to purchase this property. So they've got mortgage in here. They've got they can put in the mortgage. They can put in the savings that they've got. Okay, where have you got the savings from? We need to ask them where are they employed. Again, these are questions that you're probably asking your clients over email, and there's lots of back and forth. You're asking a salary. Again, we find people are much more willing to do it if it's over an application. And so they put their salary payments in there, and then if there's a gift involved, we know this is particularly cumbersome, is getting the information if bank of mum and dad are gifting money to somebody, and we ask them to input that info there, and obviously the mobile number. Again, this is something that a lot of folks didn't have to do even a year ago, and are now having to do these source of funds, source of wealth checks for the more enhanced AML, and we just make that super simple for you. And then the client can go in here and just upload any proof of address, like documents. Again, just super simple for them to do through the application. In terms of what comes back, we've built a really straightforward one-stop report where you get everything back from your client. You can just download it from the Thirdfort platform, where you see an image of your client, you get a document report, you can see that being verified, the ID, the passport, driver's license. You see that individual matches the driver's license or passport. You can see that they're being electronically screened for their address match. They're not a PEP and sanction. We can monitor if they need to. They can upload the document there. It's obviously grayed out for data protection, but you'll see that document on file. And then you get the source of funds report if needed for the more enhanced AML. And we can see where they're getting their money from. It's the mortgage, the lender, if there's a gift involved, if there's savings, and then you can see the bank statement report. So we run some analysis on this, and we show you the largest incoming and outgoing transactions. You can see where they're employed, you see gift, inheritance, etc. And then you've got full bank statements again as an appendix here. So this is what the compliance team, for many of the businesses that we work with, just find this such a time saver rather than getting it manually. And in a world where we're continually taken aback, where you can get fake bank statements so easily through websites like this, what is when you use a solution like Thirdfort, is this information is 100% genuine. So this is where the world's moving towards, is ways of getting genuine information. And HMRC, who we work closely with and know this solution well, see this as a really big benefit of doing AML, as you know that information is 100% genuine. And that is really all on the demonstration. Yeah, you've got utility bills, proof of address, and everything here. I would say, just to reiterate, if your clients don't want to use an application, there's ways around that. We've got a simple platform here where you can put them through. You can run the documents through there, but you can also do the company checks as well. And very soon you'll be able to do the land registry title check, something we're launching in January. So this is, again, it's our vision here that you've got one platform to do everything. You're not going to 3, 4, 5 different platforms and still doing manual work. You've got one platform to do it all. And your client, once they do this, check through Thirdfort, we want them to be able to securely share this information with third parties. And we're working with in line with the government identity framework around, which is very much encouraging this one AML that can be used in the transaction. So we're one of 3 approved suppliers that's working in that scheme as well. So this is going to moving towards a world where not only is it digital first and tech first, but it's actually going to be accepted by lawyers, mortgage brokers, lenders. So the clients are speeding up this whole transaction rather than doing this KYC and AML many times over. And I am going to stop there and pause for breath, because I'm sure people will have questions. So let me just stop showing my screen and open the floor up to questions.
Thanks, Ollie. I think we're all going to come back on camera now for the Q&A section. Oh,
great, thanks, Kelly.
So you can ask any questions at all, questions of Ollie, question of us at RICS about anything that we've talked about today, or anything AML related, and we'll try our best to answer it. This is one for you, Ollie. Is the Thirdfort app available on Apple and Android?
Yes, it is. And they are fortunate to be rated over 4.5 stars of around 5,000 reviews on both Apple and Android.
Great.
Sorry, there's my webcam. There we go.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Just waiting to see if we get any more questions through. How much is this package?
Sure. So cost of a check with Thirdfort ranges from, on pay-as-you-go, £3 up to kind of £7 or £8 per check. But for some of the larger businesses that use us, it's their discounted costs, based on packages. You can try this on pay-as-you-go. So we do have lots of businesses that try it. And then if you want to use us at higher volume, you can lock into a year's contract, and you unlock cheaper prices. So yeah, we don't have any kind of upfront 3-year credits or anything like that. We back our technology and want you to try before you buy. So it's super simple to do that. You just go to thirdfort.com and you click in the top right hand of the corner and say get in touch, and one of my colleagues would be delighted to do a short kind of 15-minute demonstration and understand from you whether this might be a good fit for your business.
Thanks, Ollie. We had a question about where anyone can find our first RICS webinar. So that is on the RICS website. If you look in latest news, there was a memo that went out reminding everyone of their money laundering obligations. And at the bottom of that article, there is a link to the very first webinar. And it's also on our Insight community, which is an online platform for all RICS members, other property professionals, and RICS staff to interact with one another. So if you join that community, you'll find a copy of it there as well. Ollie, probably one for yourself. How secure is the platform? The amount of personal information held on individuals is a goldmine for hackers.
Yeah, very good question. So in terms of security, it's the most important thing. We don't store any of this underlying data centrally. We allow, so that the information, the underlying data is actually stored in the consumer's device. We generate a report that's accessible to the end professional, but we don't have a big data warehouse centrally for that exact reason, because this is obviously a big risk for us. But then the second point in that is this information is encrypted end to end. So even if there was a hack that happened in the microsecond when that information goes from the client, the buyer or seller's app, to the report that's generated for you, that information is totally encrypted. And we are, our FCA regulated as a business. We have regular penetration tests through being regulated by someone like the FCA. We obviously work with 600 businesses. We've got around 40,000 of their clients a month using this platform. But what we see from businesses that use this is the way they're gathering this information manually and over email. It's inherently insecure, people emailing over passports, driver's license, bank statements, because emails are so easy to hack. So this is actually, although you might not think it initially, this is taking your data security to the next level, because there's not that vulnerability of people just emailing over through Gmail and Hotmail, where this stuff can be infiltrated and leaked, and it's putting someone's information at risk, especially with the volume of phishing and hacks that go on. This all happens in a controlled, secure, end-to-end encrypted environment. So yeah, security is the most important thing that we think of all day, every day when we build and operate the system.
Thank you. Another one for you, Ollie, asking to explain a little bit more about the forthcoming land registry integration.
Yeah, of course. So there's two phases to this. The first one is we're just building a straightforward integration so you can download the title reports and requests, reports from Thirdfort, rather than going to the land registry's website, which we know isn't the easiest. The second stage is actually extracting the name of the person or people on the title and then automating them through Thirdfort's identity check and AML check, such that you don't need to log into land registry, see who the title check is, both the seller, for the seller's property, whether it's selling them or it's a rental property, and then having to do AML and KYC in a separate system, or having to do that manually. You can actually do that all in one click through Thirdfort. So there's two phases. Our first phase, I say, we're just integrating with land registry. That's ongoing at the moment, so you can pull the reports on title. But second phase is actually once we extract the people that are on the title, and then we can automatically run them through Thirdfort. It's just going to save you so much time in doing this and going to different systems.
Okay, next question I think is for us at RICS. I only act for 2 to 3 landowners who are AML checked by their lawyer. Do I need to do another check? So you are allowed to rely on AML checks from third parties, but the onus still lies with yourself. You need to be satisfied that those checks have been undertaken correctly, and you should have an agreement with the lawyer that you're going to rely on their checks. Anna, I don't know if you wanted to add anything in there.
No, bang on, Kelly.
Okay. As a sole trader commercial surveyor, does advising clients purely on the leasehold acquisitions fall under estate agency? My understanding is no. Anyone else free to jump in? HMRC's website also has a lot more information about the different activities that would constitute either estate agency or letting agency. Anna, possibly one you can answer. The AML regulations do not apply to all of the activities that we carry out. However, do the RICS regulations require that all clients be AML checked? I don't think our professional statement explicitly says that. It just says that you have to be mindful of money laundering, what to look out for. Obviously, there is sort of an overlap. Some firms have to be regulated by HMRC, but all firms have to be aware of the professional statement. So you don't have to, but it's up to you in terms of your business and risk assessment whether you choose to do that. Ollie, one for you. Does Thirdfort work the same for buying agents as well as selling agents?
Yes, in simple terms.
Okay. I think we've got quite a few more here for you. Are the reports or searches held in a portal on the account?
Yes, so once you get access to Thirdfort, you can then download the reports as a PDF directly from that if you use Thirdfort's portal, but it also can be integrated to your system, so the reports can populate against whatever case you're working on. But yeah, so they're easily accessible for you.
Okay, question for us, which is the Thirdfort system RICS accredited? is accreditation something we're considering? So RICS doesn't have an accreditation system per se, but we do have a tech partner program of which Thirdfort are a part of. So this is us kind of pointing people in the direction of other companies that have become a tech partner and are doing work within the built environment. Ollie, I think this is one for you. What measures are involved in knowing your customer and also knowing if they are involved in money laundering?
Yeah, sure. So knowing your customer, we do the ID verification. The suppliers that we use for the ID verification are government approved and used by banks. So we've got kind of the best in class of verifying that ID document is genuine and it's authentic, and that person that has presented the ID document to the system matches the photo in there. So that's what we have in place for kind of knowing your customer, knowing they are who they say they are. And in terms of on the anti-money laundering proving funds, we run them through a full PEPs and sanctions screen. You can then monitor them if you want. We do the electronic address match as well through Experian, so you can see that whether that person there's a match against that address that's on the Experian's database. And then technology that we've built ourselves is around once you get the bank statements, it's running the analysis on that bank statement, so the source of funds, source of wealth checks, if you need to run those. And then, as I say, I've touched on land registry title checks. Soon you're going to be able to see the person that's on the title, and then you can also see if it's a company that you're dealing with that owns the property. Very soon, today you can see the ultimate beneficial owners. Very soon you'll also be able to click a button and automatically run the ultimate beneficial owners through Thirdfort as well. So yeah, there's kind of a range of measures there that we've got a combination of. We integrate with many leading suppliers like Experian, I mentioned, LexisNexis, and there's another big one. And we, and then we build our own technology on top to make it very customized for this property transaction, where AML is particularly onerous.
Some more for you, Ollie. If someone doesn't want to use open banking, can they upload their bank statement as a separate document? Yes,
absolutely. And just on that, we've seen since open banking came into force, it was about 3 years ago, it's government led. Now we launched just over 2 years ago. We saw the uptake of people using open banking at around 50-ish%. Quite a lot of people opting out for it. So what we built even back then is if they opted out for it, we gave them a simple plan B, which was just upload your bank statement securely through the app. And that's actually just taking a photo of the bank statement. So we upload them so you can see them. So it's just in a secure encrypted environment, you can see those bank statements. So we had, as I say, a couple of years ago, around 50% of people that were opting in. We now see that number's in the mid-70s. So we're seeing this kind of gradual trend. The way we see this open banking is sort of like 2001, 2002 with paying on the internet. You know, it's back then no one trusted paying for anything online, and now we all do it every day. We see with open banking, if you can securely share that information with trusted parties who are FCA regulated, it saves you, the professional, and your client so much time that we're seeing like this increasing trend when more and more people are doing it. But there is this workaround where they can, as you say, if they don't want to link their bank, they can just upload the bank statement securely through the application too.
Okay, we've got 2 questions here that are on the similar vein, which is, does Thirdfort work for commercial agents who are required to run company AML on both the landlord as well as the tenant?
Yeah, so this is something that was the #1 requested feature, which was, can we run a company search through Thirdfort? So can we put Thirdfort Limited through the platform and see who the ultimate beneficial owners are, see the credit report of that business, see if there's any adverse searches against that business. We launched that in beta about 3 months ago, so we've been testing it quite hard. It's now live on the platform, so you can put the name of that business that you're transacting with, or if you're doing commercial property transaction, if it's a fund or whoever, you can put that business or that fund through Thirdfort, and you can see the ultimate beneficial owners there, but you can see, as I say, adverse reports, you've got the article association, etc., etc. So you now got a well of information that relates to that corporate structure if you're transacting with them. And then once you see who those ultimate beneficial owners are, you can then put them through Thirdfort to validate their identity, validate their AML, their source of funds if you need to. So yeah, it's again coming back to kind of one-stop solution that we're building here.
Okay, one for us, she's wanting to know, to do all of these checks when purchasing a high value item, for example, a watch or a car, etc. I think that was covered fairly early on in the presentation. If it's a high value dealer selling things that are over 10,000 euros in one transaction or a series of link transactions, then yes, you would need to undertake these checks. Glenys, Anna, anything to add there? Okay. For sole traders whose core business is home surveys, what AML checks can we do? I think that's one for us as well. So if you're not required to be registered with HMRC, you need to be mindful of the RICS professional statement. So that would mean reporting anything that you came across that was suspicious in the course of doing your home survey.
I think just to add to that, Kelly, the professional statement says that firms should understand who their clients are in all cases, not just those that fall under the money laundering regulations. The level of checks that you will want to carry out if you're not covered by the money laundering regulations will depend on the risk assessment that you at the firm have done.
Okay, thank you. I'm the only RICS member in a local authority who lead small workshops, etc. What level of AML should I adopt? And presumably as a member, I need to ensure that there are proper processes and procedures in place. Larger transactions are placed with agents. I think that follows on from the last question that, like Anna said, you need to know who you're dealing with. You need to assess what level of due diligence you need to apply if you're not required to also be registered with HMRC. But if you're determining what level to apply, what checks to do, it's always useful to check the actual regulations to give yourself a guide. Anna, anything to add there?
Just to say that if you're working, in a local authority, etc., obviously you're unlikely to be working in a firm that is regulated by RICS, but I think it's good to still have regard to the principles that the professional statement outlines.
Yeah. Ollie, another one for yourself. Does Thirdfort have any plans to roll out anywhere outside of the UK? And how it says, how do the AML requirements compare between the UK and elsewhere? I mean, it's not our regulations, so we wouldn't, RICS wouldn't be in a place to comment on outside of the UK. But Ollie, if you have any insight, feel free to share.
Yeah, of course. So the first point is can this tech be used for international clients? And the answer to that is yes. And we have many people that use this internationally. Yeah, in terms of like us as a business, where do we see like other jurisdictions where AML is increasingly cumbersome? Also, the UK is probably the most regulated country now in Europe, and there's been a big clampdown on money laundering and the detrimental effects of money laundering to wider society. So yeah, we see across Europe there's obviously some of the same challenges. So I think that there would be scope for international expansion at the right time for us. But the technology today will work for international buyers and sellers.
Okay, something that I can answer: with high net worth individuals who keep their money in complex trusts, would you still need to rely on the client to provide the information? Actually, no, sorry, I think this is yours. I think the next one's mine. With regards to high net worth individuals who often keep their money in complex trusts, would I still need to rely on the client to provide the information about the beneficial owners, or will your system be able to do that check?
So it depends how complex the trust is. Many of these trusts are held in offshore accounts in jurisdictions where they deliberately obfuscate who the true owner is, and it's a paper-based manual trial. The platform today will help you if you can get to knowing who that beneficial owner is, but we're relying, especially for our company search, the corporate screening, we're relying on whatever data is available in that jurisdiction, whether that's BVI's, Guernsey, or other countries. And often a lot of these jurisdictions, they're deliberately short on providing everything about that particular trust or corporate entity. So yeah, it's sort of reliant on the company's house equivalent in those jurisdictions. So it varies enormously.
Thank you. This is the question I can answer. Are checks required when you're dealing with lettings and not sales? Yes, if the rent is over €10,000 per month, and you will also need to register with HMRC as your money laundering supervisor. Ollie, do company searches cover foreign registered businesses? You may have touched upon this in your last answer.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Okay. This is one for yourself. Payment card industries require know your business, know your customer AML check. Can this system be integrated with a third-party system or technology? In that case, would you charge integration fees? What kind of security requirements should you have for third-party integration? And can the payment card industry use Thirdfort technology?
Okay, so I think there's two bits there. The first bit's about integration with third parties. And the answer to that is we integrate with 10 different third parties today, and we'll integrate with more to help us run these KYC and AML checks. So that's the first thing. In terms of, secondly, around payment aspect of it, yeah, I'm not sure I fully understand the exact nature of the question, but if I've understood it right, can Thirdfort be used to facilitate transfers from buyer or seller to agent or lawyer? We see a way in which open banking as a technology can facilitate safe payments through, saving rather than having to go into online banking and sending money to a sort code and account number, which is very risky. I think longer term, there's a way through open banking where it's actually within like a closed loop. It's a simpler, more secure way of sending money, especially if it's within a kind of rental transaction, which I know obviously lots of agents handle that, and it's quite manual and cumbersome reconciling all that money against the different properties. So yeah, we see a way this technology can help with kind of gathering that tenant payments and reconciling it securely as well, and that's something we're looking to going to look into deeply kind of next year.
Okay. One for us, do the regulations also apply to contractors providing building services over £10,000? My understanding was no, but Glenys or Anna, feel free to share your thoughts as well.
No, that's my understanding as well, Kelly, and something that we flagged in a recent response to a call for evidence that Treasury issued was that potentially there is a gap where there is potentially a high risk of money laundering for building contractors who go, or developers who go on to sell their own property essentially. So there are some gaps, as we believe, in the current regime. Whether or not anything will be done with that feedback, I'm not sure.
Thank you. Ollie, does Thirdfort comply with GDPR?
Yes, and we built the platform in a post GDPR world. So we knew that everything that we designed was not having to get shoehorned to GDPR like lots of other tools out there. We actually built this knowing exactly what GDPR and how it would work. So yeah, and there's lots of information around the data protection policies we have and how we store and handle client data. So if you wanted to take a closer look at that, we've got an in-house legal team, but yeah, my colleagues are kind of well versed on that. So happy to get into the detail of GDPR and data protection. Maybe after this call with anyone that's specifically interested in that.
Okay, thank you. Anna, I think you may be able to tackle this question. It sort of touches on a question that you've answered a few moments ago. Are we saying you need to do identity checks on every individual who requests a level 2 or level 3 survey?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
I'll let Anna go for it. Go for it.
Yeah, this is home buyer
survey.
survey.
No, Ollie, it's fine.
Okay, yeah, I mean, for our side of it, you can put through, we're seeing people, everyone that has a beneficial, if it's a seller, everyone that has a beneficial interest in that property should go through Thirdfort, should have their identity verified. If somebody's gifting money, and this is something that we've seen like a sort of new challenge, if you like, of AML, how do you know that person that's gifting money on the buyer side hasn't got that money from dealing drugs? And that's happened. There's been many cases of people laundering it through using money mules, students or younger people who, maybe are more vulnerable and using them as money mules. So there's now onus to check the person that's gifting money as well on the buyer side, as well as if you've got Mr. and Mrs. that are buying it. Both of them need to have their identity verified. But you look at source of funds and source of wealth checks as a collective. for both of those two, whereas identity checks, you actually need both of the people that will have a beneficial interest in that property.
I can come in now, Kelly, if that's all right. So,
Yes, please.
so my understanding is that this question relates to the level 2 and 3 home buyers surveys. And what I would do is again refer you back to the professional statements. So I think the things that you need to think about, rather than us giving a definitive yes or no, is what are the risks that you've identified for this type of work, and if those risks you consider to be low in terms of the risk of money laundering, then you are potentially unlikely to need to do checks. But do go to the professional statement, have a look, and it obviously depends on your own firm profile and your documented risk profile.
Thanks, Anna. This is something Glenys and I can answer. It's to do with the customer due diligence single transaction limit of 15,000 euros or 10,000 euros. So 10,000 euros for high value dealers or letting agents, that's the trigger point at which you need to register with HMRC for money laundering supervision. And then the 15,000 euro single transaction limit, that's where the regulations apply. So you have to apply customer due diligence to any transactions above that level. Glenys, don't know if you wanted to add anything in there. Okay. Just had another question come in. Would you need to do checks on ID on help to buy clients if carrying out a valuation? Anna, I think this comes back to the answer you just gave a few moments ago about looking at the professional statement, determining the risk and applying what you feel is necessary.
Yeah, I would say same principle applies.
Okay, that's all our questions at the moment, but I'll just give it a couple of minutes in case we get any more. I am of the view that the agents and the solicitors carry out the checks, not the surveyor that visits the property for a level 2 or level 3 inspection. I think this is the same as we've just answered on the previous question. As an RICS member, you do have to have regard to the RICS professional statement, and you do need to be aware of money laundering and be able to spot any suspicious activity. Okay, we'll just give it one more minute to see if we get any last minute questions coming in. So as I mentioned, the recording of this will be available. You'll get an email directly to you if you want to watch the presentation again. A copy of the RICS slides are available in the handout section of this webinar. Glenys, I think this was part of one of your slides regarding the due diligence checks. A point was made regarding a property not being a buy-to-let. Could you expand on this point? I think this was one of the examples of enhanced due diligence.
So if a property is buy-to-let, you must not you can't carry out simplified due diligence. Now, it may be appropriate that you can carry out standard due diligence, or it may be enhanced, but what you can't do is simplified. That's what the regulations are saying. If the property is buy-to-let, do not do simplified due diligence.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions coming through. If you do have any further questions, please join our Insight community. Go on there. Oh, we have got another one. Are AML checks required for lease surrenders? Again, this comes back to the answer that Anna gave. If it's not something that you need to be registered with HMRC for, you need to have a look through the RICS professional statement and undertake your own risk assessment and determine what needs to be done there. And we've just had another question where the first session is. If you go onto the RICS website and go onto the latest news page, there is an AML memo on there. And if you scroll down to the bottom of the screen, it will give you the link to the first session. And like I said, if you join the Insight community, you'll be able to find it on there also. Right, I have another question. When doing money laundering checks on a company, who do other checks need to be applied to? Ollie, I don't know if you can kind of talk through what your platform would do in respect of company checks.
Yeah, so it would show you who the ultimate beneficial owner is of that company, and you'll likely need to do the AML KYC check on those beneficial owners if they have more than 30%, I think it is, of the company. And yeah, you can then put those individuals through Thirdfort's identity check, so through the application, or put them straight through the platform to get an instant kind of PEP sanction screen on them. Depending on the level of risk involved in the transaction. But short answer is yes, you can do that through our platform.
Okay. I haven't seen any more yet, but every time I've said that, we've had some more come through. So I'll just give it 60 seconds if anyone wants to ask another question. Like I say, you can get in touch with us through the Insight community. You can email the regulation inbox and that will get sent out to the relevant person to answer. You're not limited just to this session. Do AML checks need to be completed on PSC? I'm not sure what PSC means. I don't know if any of you others know what that means. If you can type in another question, just explaining what you mean by PSC, hopefully we'll be able to answer for you. Oh, persons of significant control, not only beneficial owners. So that would be a yes in the case of companies. Yeah, you absolutely would. Does using a company such as Thirdfort make you as a company fully compliant with the AML rules? So if I go from an RICS perspective first, as we've said, you as the firm and as the registered entity with HMRC, you are ultimately liable for any for all of your AML compliance. So if you're relying on third parties, went through some factors to consider with you about what you need to think about when you're outsourcing your AML checks. And Ollie, I'm sure you can come in and then give a bit more information about from your side.
Yeah, of course. So you obviously need to understand how our platform works. And so there's lots of information my colleagues can provide about what are the checks that go on and how they work. But exactly as Kelly said, in the risk-based approach, it's on you to decide whether to proceed with that transaction or not. And not everything can be covered through Thirdfort. For instance, if somebody walks in with a duffel bag stuffed with cash, but then they still check out, their source of funds is impeccable, they're, not a sanction, their ID checks out, that's quite a big red flag that you should be raising in whether to proceed with them. But what I would say is Thirdfort as an alternative to manual ways of AML and KYC checking it is taking you forward light years, because manual ways of gathering documents, passport, driver's license, firstly, how do you know whether they're real or fake? And then secondly, when it comes down to source of funds, source of wealth, you're getting bank statements, source of funds questionnaires, and all that information which you've got in paper form, which A, is super timely to gather, B, how do you know it's genuine, and C, the regulator looking at you and saying, well, it's on you anyway. So we will immediately, on starting using Thirdfort, take you up several notches from a risk, preventative, compliant perspective. But this is not a Thirdfort will do absolutely everything you need, and you still need to take it in the context of that particular transaction. As I say, someone's particularly shady, wants to push a transaction through really, really quickly because they're selling a property they maybe don't own. There's all these kinds of risk factors that go in, but we provide you a comprehensive platform to do all the the checks that you want around identity, source of funds, PEPs and sanction screening. So it should be used within that risk-based approach.
I think also it's important to note that what Thirdfort won't do is they won't do your firm's risk assessment, and they won't have anything to do with your policies, controls and procedures. That is a firm individual bespoke thing that has to happen for your firm. Every firm that's required to register for anti-money laundering must do those things, and they must be about your firm, which is why HMRC and also the RICS will say don't use generic templates.
And HMRC are not going to sign off on any approach that you choose to use. That's very much, you know, the onus still lies with you to ensure compliance.
And sorry, I'll add one final point there for what it's
Yep.
worth. You know, this kind of circa 100 agents we now work with, you know, a few of them have had HMRC come around. HMRC know us, we speak to them regularly about their policy, about their regulating, and yeah, so they recognise the Thirdfort reports and, you know, recognise us as a business in this space. So yeah, that's also something to factor in.
Yeah, absolutely. And when HMRC give out any fines, that information is publicly available on their website if they do fine you for lack of AML policies and controls. We haven't had any questions for a few moments.
Which is also just a really good place. Sorry, Kelly.
No,
it's also a really good place to look at why other firms have been fined. You know, it's a good way to brush up on your own practices and ensure that you're filling any gaps. I know that other firms have found that particularly useful.
Just had another question come in. I think this is about home buyer surveys again, annual building surveys. So with level 2 and 3 reports, we rarely, if ever, meet the client. Identity checks would be extremely difficult to carry out. Is RICS able to give any clearer guidance on when AML should occur in such circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously a hot topic, Kelly, and potentially we've identified a bit of a gap where we need to provide some slightly more robust guidance. So I'll take that away. I mean, as I say, go back to the professional statement. It's all about your risk assessment within your firm. But you know, I can certainly look into this a little bit more and potentially give some more robust guidance.
Great, thank you. So we haven't had any other questions for a few minutes. I think we'll close the webinar now. Thank you all for attending. Thank you to the panelists for helping us answer questions and presenting. And like I say, the recording will be available. It should come out to you by link tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.